Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Jollof rice. That's right, I'm going to show you my take on West Africa's most popular dish. And out of all the things I love to teach people, how to cook rice is definitely one of my favorites, since it really is a simple thing. But people overthink it, and they're scared to mess it up, which is no way to cook. But the good news is, I'm going to show you a method so foolproof, you're going to have to work really hard for this not to come out amazing. So with that, let's go ahead and get started by tossing some things in a blender, beginning with 1 cored and quartered tomato, as well as 1 seeded and roughly chopped up red bell pepper. We are also going to add 1 whole habanero pepper. Oh yeah, seeds and all. Just pull off the stem and throw it in. Along with 1 red Fresno chili, which is simply a red jalapeno, and you can use that instead. And then we'll also toss in some garlic cloves, along with some minced ginger. And then we'll finish up this component by pouring in a couple cups of cold fresh water, at which point we'll blend this on high for about a minute, or until it's completely smooth. And once that's been accomplished, it's ready to use to cook our rice in. Oh, and by the way, traditionally, this would be cooked like a sauce and simmered for a while before it would actually be added to the rice. So while the rest of the recipe is going to be fairly standard, this first step is going to be quite different. So once blended, we'll go ahead and set that aside, and we will head to the stove, where we will add a lot of olive oil to a pan, set over medium heat. And pretty much any pan with a tight-fitting lid will work for this. But if you do happen to have something about this size and shape, with a tight-fitting lid, I think that's what works out best for this recipe. And what we'll do is toss in 1 diced red onion, along with a nice big pinch of salt. And we'll cook that stirring for about 4 or 5 minutes, or until those onions just start to turn translucent. And once they are looking a little something like this, what we'll do is clear out a space in the middle, into which we will add our tomato paste in a very generous amount. And we'll sort of spread that out, and we will cook it stirring for a couple minutes, just to take the raw edge off that tomato paste, and toast it and caramelize it a little bit, which in my opinion really does make it taste better and more savory. So I guess cooking this is technically optional, but not really for me. I pretty much will do that every time. And then once we've cooked our tomato paste for a little bit, we can go ahead and start tossing in our spices and herbs, which will include some smoked paprika, some curry powder, some ground cumin, some freshly ground black pepper, some turmeric, and a nice spoon of dried thyme. And what we'll do is stir that together and cook it for another 2 minutes or so, just to wake up those spices and really infuse that olive oil in the pan with all those beautiful flavors. And once that's been accomplished, we can go ahead and grab the star of the show, our rice. And what I like to use for this is basmati in its raw form. Okay, quite often in this recipe, they'll tell you to use parboiled rice, which is partially cooked and dried. But I really love how the basmati rice turns out, so that's what I'm going with. And what we'll do is start stirring that in. And I almost forgot, we also want to turn off the heat. Okay, I don't want things scorching onto the bottom of the pan before we add our liquids, since we're going to be stirring this rice in for a couple minutes. And that's because we want to make sure every single grain of that rice has been coated in that oily, spicy tomato paste mixture. So I want you to really pay attention and do that thoughtfully and thoroughly. I mean, you are after all the administration of this rice lubrication, and it really is one of the key moments in this operation. And that's it. Once that's set, we can go ahead and toss in a bay leaf, as well as a nice big spoon of chicken bouillon paste, which as you know is fairly salty. So along with the salt I added to the onions, I should be okay. And of course, we can taste and adjust later. And that's it. We can go ahead and pour in our tomato and pepper smoothie. Very carefully, please. Okay, do not under any circumstances let some splash out onto your stove, like I did. But anyway, let's go ahead and stir that in, and turn our heat up to high. And if you'll excuse me, I do need to wipe that off, because it's kind of bothering me. And then once that's been stirred in, we will simply wait for this to start to simmer. And while we're waiting, do not be tempted to stir it. Just simply wait for it to start simmering like this. And as soon as it does, what we'll do is cover it, and we'll reduce our heat to medium-low, and we will set our timer for 20 minutes. And please note, when we cook basmati rice in water, we usually only cook it for 15 minutes, and then we let it rest for 10, and then we fluff it. But when you cook rice in a sauce like this, it always takes longer. So we'll go ahead and let that simmer on medium-low, fairly enthusiastically for exactly 20 minutes, at which point we're going to turn off the heat and we will set our timer for 12 minutes, during which time we will do absolutely nothing, including taking off the lid. Do not take off the lid. And you're probably thinking, I wasn't going to, but now that he said not to, I really want to. Well, don't. We need to keep all that heat and moisture trapped in. But after 12 minutes, once that timer rings, we can uncover it. And we can grab our finest fluffing fork. And we can very carefully start breaking up this rice, or fluffing as it's referred to in the business. And besides the occasional circular stir, what we're mostly doing is digging down to the bottom and sort of lifting a clump of rice up to the surface, where we then break it up with the tip of the fork. And as I do this, what I want you to really notice is how every one of those rice grains is perfectly plump, having soaked in all that amazing sauce. But as you can see, every single grain is separate, and we do not have soft, mushy rice sticking together. I mean, it's still starchy, and those grains of rice will kind of adhere to each other. But that's good. That helps it stay on the fork. So not to brag, but we totally nailed the texture. And what about the taste? Oh my goodness. This really is extraordinarily flavorful. Right? It's spicy, it's acidic, it's sweet, it's savory. We even have little hints of smoke from the paprika. And after a couple bites, you will fully understand why this is so popular. It is just an absolute flavor bomb. And by the way, I hate that term, but it so perfectly fits here, I had to use it. And then I would have had no problem serving this right out of the pan. But to make it a little prettier, I did transfer it into this dish, and then garnish the top with some freshly sliced green onions and some cilantro. And that's it. My take on Jollof rice was ready to enjoy again. And while we did take a major shortcut, not cooking that tomato pepper sauce, I can't imagine this tasting any better. And as long as you perform all those other steps as shown, I want to say it really does not make that big of a difference. Or at least not one I can perceive. And while I've always served this kind of thing as a side dish, many people think this is a perfectly fine main course. And I don't think I would argue with that. This is definitely satisfying enough to do that. And if you did want to serve this next to or under something delicious, may I humbly suggest our West African style grilled beef, which also goes by the name of suya. And I'm sure this would be amazing with so many different things, but man, was it great with that. So if you haven't seen that video, check it out. But in the meantime, I really do hope you give my version of Jollof rice a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.